Coming up, a Sad Styles production.
Hello and welcome. My name is Mikey Aaronworth, signing on to the Sign Off of Frameworth podcast for yet another week. It is the show where we talk about all the stories you didn't know you wished you knew about the world of sports and sports marketing. I am joined in studio once again by my loyal co-host, some like to say the main host, Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing. We've had a string of good recordings, eh? We put a few together in the bank, and how you keeping up? You managing?
No, this is great. I'm getting ahead of the curve in case I go away for a little while. I'm planning to do.
Listeners will know that we just had a couple weeks of you not here as well. So go away. You should say again.
Well, I should give them a heads up. I'm heading to Florida this weekend to do a signing with our new exclusive player for the Blue Jays, Alec Manoah.
There you go. Heard it here first.
Yep, there
Little
you go.
Exclusive for the Sign Off podcast. And we've got a guest waiting in the wings who we can't wait to introduce in a little bit. But before we do, as we normally do on the podcast, a little bit of a shout out to all of our listeners out there who have shown us some love on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just a reminder, if you haven't already and you're out there listening, just go onto your app, give us a rating and a review, and you may find yourself with a free piece of memorabilia that we'll send out to you. We do some random draws, give you a bit of a shout out on the podcast like we're about to right now. This review comes in from Tim Marin via Apple Podcasts. 5 stars. Calls it the Wayne Gretzky of podcasts.
Well, there you go.
There you go. Not too bad.
How apropos for today's show.
How apropos of today. Every episode is a great one. This guy says, listen, with those sorts of puns, you should be the host of this podcast, not me. You won't be disappointed. The guys do their research, ask great questions that are awesome guests, and keep the fun conversations going. I hate when each one ends. Keep up the great work. I'll be listening. Tim, thank you so much. As we always do, reach out to us, signoffpod@frameworth.com, 30 days from the drop of this episode. And today, I think in the spirit of our guest and in the spirit of the title of that review, let's go with a Kevin Lowe 8x10 photo.
There you go.
There you go.
That sounds good.
We'll send that out. So reach out to us, signoffpod@frameworth.com. And hey, if you haven't already, leave us a rating and review. We choose randomly from those lists to send out some giveaways to. But enough of that. Enough patting on the back. Love to start these episodes out with a little bit of self-affirmation, as we always do. But we've got more important things to get to. Our guest today played 7 years in the NHL, which included 3 seasons backstopping for a talented young team in Edmonton, featuring the likes of Mark Messier, Kevin Lowe, Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, and a little-known talent named Wayne Gretzky. After going deep with the New York Rangers and mentoring a budding Steve Yzerman in Detroit, his legendary charisma and charm landed him roles as a player agent, brand ambassador, director of player development, and best man. More on that later. It's a pleasure to introduce the man who's perhaps the most referenced person by other guests on this podcast, which is a simple testament to the mark he's left not only on the game, but on his peers. Ladies and gentlemen, Eddie Mio.
Hey, Eddie.
Hey, thank you, Mikey and Brian. I was laughing when you said that he's going to be missing again for 2 weeks. When is he here? Every time I see him on Facebook, him and his wife, lovely wife, they're off somewhere, whether they're overseas in Europe, on a boat, on a cruise. I want to be your dad when I grow up. I really believe that.
Listen, I want you to be my dad as well, because maybe you'd be around a little bit more often. It's like this guy's trying to get away from me or something.
Too much. No,
yeah, he's a good man.
Some of it's business. I was 5 days in Florida, 1 day to do the signing, and the rest is going to be kicking back. It's a long winter, and COVID has taken its toll. But
well,
anyway.
To be fair, you've I guess gotten used to traveling more often, both for work and for pleasure. And for the past 2 years, you couldn't quite do that. I'm sure we'll touch on a little bit of what that meant for you, Eddie, in a little bit there. But I mentioned in the introduction, your name comes up quite a bit on this podcast. We've had tons of guests, Brad Jansen, as we were talking about earlier. Another one, Stan Butler, more recently, who had tons of great things to say about you. And he asked us specifically, and I'll touch on this, because if you're listening and you haven't heard the Stan Butler episode, it's fantastic. Legendary coach who had a ton of great stories to tell, some of which involved our guest today, Eddie Mio. But he asked us to ask you a couple questions. So in order to keep that cliffhanger from going too long.
Censored program? Censored podcast?
Nothing censored about it. That's why we brought you on. So you can feel free to tell whatever stories you want.
I'm afraid.
I'm excited because you're afraid. He wanted to ask you about a hotel room in Penticton, particularly the maids. Do you have any stories about that?
Oh, God. I don't know why he's putting me under the bus. It was more him. No, the maids. What he's referring to is Stan and I go way back when he was still with Wexford Raiders in Junior A Tier 2, and when Mike Barnett and I decided to start doing summer camps, we needed a guy. We used to go to Brainerd, so they had their staff there, but that was getting a little too expensive because we were getting more and more young talent, like Rico Fata, Joe Thornton, Michael Hangre. But so we decided to do our own. So I went out and got Stan to lead the on ice skills and the practices. Well, one year we decided to go to Penticton, and I don't know whose idea it was, but we had just picked up the twins, the Sundin twins, and I think it was because they both went to Vancouver. We decided to have it at Penticton, and we had quite a draw, but we had Joe Thornton, Tim Glenn. We had a good group, Heatley. We had a good group. So we were in this one hotel, and there was a pretty cute maid, but it was more the kids that were, being rambunctious, not so much me. I was an old guy. She was young.
Okay. Okay.
So that's as far as I'm going to take it, because the rest is I want to keep my reputation
a little
up,
bit.
So, yeah.
Well, no, if you want to keep your reputation up, you tell the story, Eddie.
Oh, yeah.
not this one, but Stan and I thought he was going to hit you with another one, but we'll keep that one quiet too. And that was a night out in town between me and Stan. So.
Okay, well, he did ask me as well to ask you about one more incident. I don't know if this is the one he's talking about, but it was a wedding in Windsor. And I noticed not Edmonton, because that was Wayne Gretzky's wedding, but a wedding in Windsor. Maybe he didn't want to put you on the spot with that other night out, but what can you tell us about this mysterious wedding in Windsor?
Well, obviously it was mine. It has to be mine, because that's the only wedding that I know that we attended all together. It was quite the event. Stan obviously was invited. We had Mike Barnett. Wayne was the best man. There was over 440 people, half of which I didn't know who they were, but friends kept saying, well, you got to invite this guy, this guy, and this guy. So the wedding was mine. That's the only one I can think that Stan and I were there together. So it was quite an event. The marriage didn't last very long. 4 years later, I was divorced, but we had a good time. The guys came in. All my clients at the time, I was with Phoenix Coyotes, but my old clients, well, shouldn't say old, former clients, all came in, and we had a very good time. Kevin was in, Pep Brisson, obviously Glenn Sather. We had a good time. So I'm sure he's referring to that wedding, because that's the only one I was at in Windsor for a long time.
Speaking of weddings, Eddie, I saw on social media yesterday, and I haven't confirmed with Wayne or anybody else yet, but there was a party of bridesmaids and Paulina heading down somewhere in the islands. Is that something that, I mean, it was on social media and Instagram, so I got to assume, is there something in the works there?
I think you better ask.
I mean, if she posted it, it's got to be. I don't know.
Did she post whose wedding it was?
Well, there was her in white and a lot of people in pink, so I'm maybe assuming that maybe she's getting married.
Without me giving it away, what do you think, Brian?
I'm pretty sure, reading into that, and I don't know for a fact, but if there's a plane load of bridesmaids in pink and Paulina in white, and they're going to celebrate somewhere, maybe she's tying the knot.
This is, Eddie, I'm not sure if you knew it, but Frameworth has a new branch. It's our TMZ branch, where we report on celebrity social media.
Mickey, you notice I'm keeping a little tight lip, because he already knows the answer. Okay? He already knows.
I think so.
I haven't talked to Wayne. I might talk to him this weekend, but I don't know for a fact. But, I mean, if it's Instagram and it's all over Instagram, I got to assume that that's the case. But anyways, we'll let you know when I know for sure.
Okay. Unless she's just practicing.
Well,
yeah, there you go.
That's always a good excuse for a party. But you know what?
I'd like to get in a little bit about your early playing days, and then we'll get kind of into your relationships and what you're up to nowadays. 1974, drafted by both the Blackhawks and the Vancouver Blazers of the WHA, but you decided to stay in the minors. Now, this is more commonly known, but I have a question about your reasoning behind this, because Chicago at the time had a pretty decent goalie in Tony Esposito. Now, we had Bernie Perron on, and he talked about the benefits he had playing under Jacques Plante, one of his childhood icons. Was there a part of you that considered the balance between learning from a guy like Esposito and the potential inability to play in an organization where Esposito's there? What was your balancing act there in your thinking?
Well, what happened there was I went to camp with Chicago, but it was Dallas Blackhawks camp in Guelph at the university there. And I did well because I was still in college. I was just finished my sophomore year. So at the camp, they wanted to sign me, but it was more of they would supplement my contract with Chicago, but I'd be playing in Flint. Flint was in the International League at that time. It was a good league. But I decided to go back to college and finished off the next 2 years. And I had All-American years both years, so I figured my worth would be up. They still had that goalie you just mentioned, Tony Esposito. And every other year they would alternate between Michel Dumas and Mike Weiser. One guy would stay up. The next guy would play in Dallas all the time. And, it was back and forth, but Tony was the constant. I mean, Tony was playing 60 games a year that year. So, all those years. So when it came to my senior year and we were discussing which avenue to go, by that time, Vancouver had folded and they became Calgary Cowboys. And they picked up my rights from Vancouver. And I signed with them. And I was up for about a month, and then they decided to send me and get me some playing time because Calgary had a guy by the name of Don Smokey McLeod, and he had just won the Avco Cup the year before. Heck of a goalie, and so they wanted me to get some playing time. And I went down to, first it was Tidewater, which was Norfolk, Virginia. We had a great time on the beaches there. But the Southern League folded, and I ended up in Erie, Pennsylvania in the North American League, probably better known as the league that Slapshot was formed after.
There you go.
Yeah. And trust me, everything you saw in Slapshot, it was true in the North American League. It was that crazy. Buses, the girl, everything you saw in that movie has 90% truth to that. Because I lived it for a year.
Paul Newman streaking as well. Paul Newman used to streak all the time in those games.
So after that year, Calgary folded and Birmingham Bulls picked me up. And again, I was up and down in the minors, ended up most of the year in Hampton until they loaned me out to Indianapolis. Okay. I finished the whole year there. And obviously the following year, 1978, in comes Wayne Gretzky. But the reason I decided to go to WHA, I always thought here I could get a name, start playing, and hopefully when the NHL teams, and we always knew, we had a feeling that the WHA was going to fold and NHL was going to pick up some of the stronger teams. And you could see that. Every year there was a couple teams folding. So you knew somebody was going to get picked up, especially all of a sudden the year before the five guys go to Birmingham, Pat Riggin, Ramage, Rick
Five, who we just interviewed yesterday. Yeah.
So you kind of knew those were big NHL prospects. In comes Wayne Gretzky. So I think I did a pretty good move by doing that. Got established for 4 years in the WHA, and Edmonton buys us off from Indianapolis. The next year, Edmonton becomes NHL. So I think it was a good decision because I might have been buried in the Chicago organization because, like I said, Mike Weiser and Michel Dumas and Tony ended up playing another 5 years, right? So even after we got WHA got absorbed. So this way I got to play earlier than I thought. So
another important element of this is meeting your eventual best friend in Wayne Gretzky, who, as we mentioned, you were the best man at his wedding, and vice versa. He was the best man at your wedding. Those early days playing, did you guys immediately hit it off, or was this more of a process of a few years staying with him, even in the move over to Edmonton? Did you guys just hit it off right away?
I think we hit it off. There was a third man involved in Peter Driscoll, but it was funny that summer I came back to Windsor, and Indy had just signed Wayne, and all my friends. I was playing fastball at the time. We'd go to a bar afterwards, and I was asked, I said, how do you think you're going to like playing with Wayne Gretzky? And I looked right at him. I said, I have no clue who this kid is, but how's he going to like playing with me? I'm the established guy.
Hey, there you go.
I've had 3 years, and I keep telling Wayne the story. But that was the case. So I didn't know anything about Wayne. Indianapolis, we didn't get hockey news. We didn't get news of the junior leagues, Sault Ste. Marie, World Juniors. You know, I just come from Birmingham, Indianapolis. We're kind of down south. What had happened was Pat Stapleton, Whitey Stapleton, former Chicago Blackhawks, Chicago Cougars, was our GM and coach. And he had called us up. Peter and I had a house in Carmel. And we would go back most of the summer in August. Well, Whitey called us up and said, listen, this kid, Wayne Gretzky, is going to be staying with a doctor family. They're going to be living close to you, maybe 2-3 blocks. Would you keep an eye on them and make him feel at home? Because in August, he had to go and start, high school, right? So
sure,
it ended up, Wayne's hangout was a place called Steak and Shake, okay? So Peter and I on a Friday night, we'd always, in August, we weren't playing. So we'd always Peter had this beautiful baby blue Barrettes with top down, Cadillac, brand new. So we'd come cruising in the thing, and there's Wayne holding court with his high school guys and gals. And we just look at it and say, hey, you need anything? Boom. No, we'd take off. But we were always keeping an eye on him. During the day, after school, we'd go to dinner. So the friendship bonded between myself, not only myself, but Peter Driscoll was an important part. He was the third man in the deal. And Peter had just scored 50 goals with Indy the year before, and he was a tough kid. So it was ironic that when they made the deal in November, that the three of us were going. Me and Peter were going with Wayne. So that's how the friendship built.
Well, I think Wayne and Peter were going with you based on what you were telling us earlier. I think that was the bulk of the deal, right?
All right. Mickey, I was just going to say the deal was for $850,000. $849,999 was for me. The other dollar was for Peter and Wayne. Let's get that straight with all your viewers, okay?
That is established now. That's canon.
They needed a goalie, okay? Wayne was only 17 years old, only played 8 games. We didn't know what Wayne's going to be, but I was already established.
Of course.
Now, if you're talking to Peter, if you're talking to Peter Driscoll, it's the other way. It's for Peter because he had just scored 50 the year before, and he was a tough guy. But like I said, the whole thing revolved between the two of us in August, meaning me and Peter befriending Wayne, making sure we even gave him the house some nights for his party. His guys, John Mowat, his good friend he grew up with, and a couple other guys from Brantford would drive down. We gave him the house to have a little party per se. So the bond became close between the three of us, and not ironically, but that's how the deal ended up. The three of us going to Edmonton.
Now, I heard a story because we had Gus Badali on in one of our earlier episodes, a 2-parter, a fantastic interview as well. And you mentioned that deal for $850,000, I believe it was. There was a few thousand of that would have been spent by you unknowingly after one of the flights over. And the story of this flight is fascinating to me, and it dovetails 2 stories nicely. One is the one I just mentioned, which hopefully you can tell, and the other is which was queued up to us by Gus Badali. The other was the fact that I've heard that when you got on that flight, you didn't know. You knew you were going to Alberta eventually, but you didn't know which team you were going to be traded to. Is that actually, was that possible at this point?
That was true. We had practice, and it was funny because Skalbania's daughter, and I can't remember her first name, but she was sitting in the stands that morning. And actually, she'd been in Indianapolis all week long. So Nelson Skalbania owned the Racers. And after practice, Whitey called us into his office and looked at the three of us and said, guys, I'm sorry, but go home, take your equipment, pack some clothes. You know, you're being sold. And we go, oh, wow. Where are we going? He says, we don't know yet. It's between Winnipeg and Edmonton. Who's ever got $250,000 in the bank mates the deal by 2:00. You'll know. So be at the airport by 2:00 or 1:30. You're leaving at 2:00. Well, we get to the airport and we got our equipment, luggage, and there's this small little Learjet out there. And but it didn't matter because we're going private. And back in 1978, nobody went private unless you were a big shot.
No.
So we're thinking big shot. Well, it's being delayed. It's now 4:00, 4:30, no word. And then Whitey, I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 o'clock Indy time. Whitey just said, hey, I got a phone call. Get on the plane, pack your stuff. You're heading to Minneapolis. And by the time you land, the deal should be done. So you're right. And Gus was right. When we got on that plane, we had no clue where we were going, except for
crazy.
Minneapolis.
That's
yeah, Minneapolis. We knew we were going to land in Minnie, refuel, and hopefully.
Well, that's a midpoint between Winnipeg and Edmonton, and there you go. Those poor Winnipeg fans. They could have had Wayne Gretzky and Eddie Mio and Driscoll.
Wow.
I understand there's a lot of sad people there because they know that story, right? And Winnipeg up the ante, they could have had the team. It never would have left.
It was
never would have left Winnipeg.
Pocklington and the another pretty big name I think that were kind of vying between the rights to the three of you and the stories behind. I mean, the WHA fascinates me. I love talking to people who have experience with it because I mean, even everything down to the rumors that the rights were won on a backgammon game while the flight was taking place, like all of these things, and it's become that of legend. And maybe the people involved know more, maybe they don't. But I love the fact that this era of hockey was just so up in the air, especially for the WHA. It just seems like a fascinating time to be there.
You know who ended up playing for the Avco Cup that year?
Who was that?
Edmonton and Winnipeg. And we lost in 6 games.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So so we had a chance to win a championship, and we were great all year long. We blew everybody away in the league standings, but we kind of struggled in the playoffs. And Winnipeg beat us with Terry Ruskowski, Preston. I mean, they had a pretty good team. But they came out and took it to us. But we were on the way back and coming back. And Game 6 was very important. And everybody was psyched to go, right? Everybody's psyched to go out and play and bring Game 7 back to Edmonton. Well, at Christmas time, Peter Pocklington had us doing all this positive thinking. He brought some guys in from California. So here we're supposed to have Christmas, and we're spending 8 hours in a hotel conference room listening to positive thinking exercises, this and that. But what he did do, he said, if we win the league championship, meaning this, before the playoffs, if we end up in first place, we have a one-way ticket to any Club Med in the world. Okay. If we win the Avco finals, we get the return ticket plus $1,000. Yeah. Plus $1,000 to spend. Okay. So great. We accept the deal. We end up in first place in the league standings. That's one-way trip. So now it's Game 6. We struggled the whole playoffs, but we managed, and we're getting it back. We had just beat Winnipeg, I think, 10-3 in Game 5. So the guys are rolling, feeling comfortable. So we're all ready to go on the ice. And Glenn Sather comes back in the dressing room and says, hold on, guys. Somebody wants to talk to you. Well, Peter Pockington comes in with one of his workers or whatever with a box. And he went around to every guy, gave a tube of Coppertone and these little bikini bathing suits that said Edmonton Oilers on it, right? He went around the whole team and shook their hands. We almost got a penalty because we were late getting on the ice. Well, guess what? That first period, they just took it to us. We were deflated. And anybody that played with the Oilers, I'm not trying to sell Peter Pockington under the bus, but that is what happened. And we went out, got behind 3-0 really quick, and tried to struggle to get back. And we lost it. We lost the AFCO Cup. But any other Oiler you get on, ask him about that, and he'll tell you that is a true story. So
sometimes he thinks that motivation turned into a negative. Eh?
Yeah.
Well, because like I said, everybody was psyched to get on the ice, get playing, continue. We did game 5, but now you're postponing it, and everybody's kind of looking at each other going, what is this? It could have been done afterwards or whatever. So, but they were better than us that series. Like I said, the whole playoffs, we struggled. We struggled against Hartford, and because there was only 4 teams in the playoffs. We struggled in Hartford. They took us to 7 games, and then we got down 2 games to zip against Winnipeg at home, so. And then we won 1 on the road there. They won the second one, came back, annihilated them in game 5, and I think we would have beat them in game 6. Hard to say about game 7 because that never took place, so.
That's tough. I mean, but it wasn't the end of your stint with that talented crew in Edmonton. Obviously, with the draft, with the WHA and NHL merger, your rights were actually owned by the Minnesota North Stars, but you were protected. You were one of 2 protected goalies on the Oilers. Was that ever a question? Did you know that was going to happen? Was that ever up in the air, that whether you were going to be protected?
You know what? We only had 2 goaltenders in this, really, that played there. Me and Dryden. I guess I didn't know how it happened, but at one point it looked like Minnesota wanted me back because they had traded that year. Lou Nanne traded Doug Hicks to Chicago for my rights. And he even came to Indianapolis after the trade and talked to us and said, listen, I want you back in Mini. So I didn't know. I was up in the air. I mean, Glenn didn't have to protect me. Maybe there was I didn't know who was in the system, right? No one was ever called up in 78. It was just me and Dryden. And so I didn't know what was going to happen, right? But when they did protect me, I felt really, really relieved because I liked Edmonton. Really liked it. Yeah. We had a great squad. Glenn Sather did a great job keeping and making deals to keep most of the guys from the year before. So we started off, I think, a little bit better than most of the WHA teams. Right. Winnipeg, Quebec City, and obviously Hartford. Because Glenn probably kept about 3/4 of the guys. I was excited that, hey, I wasn't going anywhere. Now I get a shot at the NHL and all that. So.
And you had a few more years, obviously, playing with Wayne. And before we get to the later parts of your career, because I'd love to get into your time in New York and get your ultimate preference between Steak Shack and Studio 54. But before you were in New York,
that was going to happen.
before you were in New York, obviously spending time with Wayne kind of laid the groundwork for some of what would come post your playing career. You had worked with Wayne at his winery at one point, as well as the vice president of U.S. sales. Stayed close, obviously. At one point, you were director of player development with Phoenix. Was that also involved around Wayne's involvement with that team too? Were you? Did you just want to remain tight and take some opportunities and help each other out along the way?
Well, even when I was traded, Wayne helped me get traded. Okay. Some guy named Grant Fuhr decided decided he could play at 18. So the expendable guy was me because Ronnie Lowe was making much more money than I was. It was pretty hard to send him to the minors. So I ended up in Wichita and playing for Larry Gordon, who was our GM the year before, right? So anyways, down there, Brian, he knows Glenn Sather. Glenn Sather never wanted to be taken in a deal. He always wanted to get the best. So there was a lot of offers going back and forth. And one was with Boston, but Glenn wanted Stan Jonathan and somebody else. And there's no way Boston was going to get. So Wayne, eventually, I think he went to Slats, and he won't probably admit it, but maybe you can ask him that off camera. But I think he said to Glenn Sather, hey, listen, Eddie's wasting away there. He doesn't belong down in the Central League. Just make the deal. And at that time, New York was struggling with goaltending because they were all hurt. John Davidson was hurt. Steve Baker. They had another third guy. Everybody was hurt. So Steve Weeks was the only goaltender. And they ended up calling up John Van Driesbach from Sault Ste. Marie, okay, as an emergency. And he was only 18. He was drafted by New York the year before, or the summer before. So anyways, the timing was right. And Glenn ended up saying, okay, all he got for me was Lance Nethery, okay, who was a Toronto guy and then went to New York. So he ended up there. Well, my first 6 games in New York, I was 6-0. And Wayne was always going to Glenn and saying, geez, Eddie won another one, Glenn. Hey, Eddie won another one. So he was instigating right at breakfast. Oh, wow, paper. Anyways, Glenn looked at Gretzky and said, that's the last time I do anybody a favor. So I think Wayne had a lot to do with getting me to a place, as you say, New York, which was a fantastic place to play. Fantastic.
Wayne is notorious for being loyal to his friends and vice versa. So,
yes, he is.
You know, and he'd go to always have your back in any situation. Yep.
Well, and I think we all benefited from that, or at least those of us those in the world who got to experience the Wayne Gretzky Fantasy Camp, because that was such a tight-knit community as well that you had been involved with. Obviously, you'd maintained your relationship with Wayne Gretzky, and our experiences there. The Wayne Gretzky Fantasy Camp comes up all the time on this podcast, and it's kind of one of the things that our listeners love hearing about most, because it's just such an intimate look into the life of some of the players.
And you know that my biggest memory was not getting a pass from Wayne Gretzky, not defending against Wayne Gretzky, but finally scoring on Eddie Mio.
Finally scoring on Eddie Mio.
I got 1 goal and maybe 30 shots over 15 years, and you know me, and it was I think it was a goal that somebody shot a puck and went off my ass and in the net, and that was it. That was all I could. Nobody could score on Eddie. He was
Brian,
still that good.
The thing is, they don't ask you how; they just ask you how many. So you scored, and
One.
Wasn't that the year you guys won? Did you won 1 year? Right?
I won, I think,
twice
over 15 years,
not like
as
that.
opposed to
Yeah.
Derek Moore.
Derek,
like
right?
11 out of 15
He
years
won
or something
almost
like
every
that.
year. I got sick of it. You know, our team won 1 year, so it's nice for everybody. But like you said, Mickey, that fantasy camp, not only did everybody enjoy it, I think the pros enjoyed it, and you know.
It seemed like that.
Yeah.
You got that vibe from everyone involved.
Yeah, we looked forward to it. In fact, I should have had hip surgery probably 5 years before we ended it all, but I didn't want to miss 1 year of this thing. So when Wayne called it quits, that's when I went and scheduled my new hip replacement, because it was starting to bother me, but there's no way I was going to get laid up for 6 months and not be able to go to that fantasy camp. And that's the kind of thing, I mean, if you talk to Savvy, Dennis Savard, you talk to Rick Tocchet came a few years. I mean, every guy that came just looked forward to those 4 or 5 days. And when he moved to Vegas, it was even better, you know? Like I said, everybody, the camaraderie, it wasn't like the campers were bugging all the guys. We had cocktails with the guys. We were at the parties. We enjoyed the guys' wives. Everybody was a friendly
Well,
unit.
not that much.
Enjoyed their wives.
Well,
Okay.
you know
Talk
what I'm
about stories
talking
from
about.
New York. All right.
Well,
Yeah. The one thing about it is all those guys, almost all the guys that were there for multiple years, and most of the guys were, because even if they couldn't really afford it, they found a way to get in. And Wayne was so generous with some of them that he just said, "You're coming. Well, I can't afford the second. You're coming back,"
Right.
and he would pick up the tab.
Yeah.
That's Wayne.
Yeah.
But you had to be that kind of guy that was a positive effect on the camp. But the guys, pros and amateurs that were there, all have still. Eddie, I'm sure you get emails and contacts from almost all those guys. So do I. We're still in touch. They all still want to go. Wayne talks about it. I talked to him back in August, and he says, we got to get another one going. And I think he said, where was it? He wanted to do it in Atlanta or somewhere where his new broadcast is.
Yeah.
But, Wayne talks about he wanted to do it in Europe one year too.
yeah, remember we were all going to Europe, right?
I haven't put my skates on since the last camp either. So
Well, I'm still waiting for you because I've been skating with the Red Wing alumni. In fact, we're going to Dallas this weekend. We're playing right after the Dallas Sabre game, and we're playing the Dallas Stars alumni. So I don't know how long I'll last with those young guys, but we stay in hopefully good shape. We just did 2 outdoor games in Detroit, so we've got a pretty good alumni. We're Mickey Redmond, Darren McCarty, Joey Kosher, Larry Murphy. We get a pretty good lineup of Hall of Famers out there, and then we also have the Hall of Shamers like myself, and
I'm sure you're still at top form.
Wait, so how does that work? I actually don't know much about that. So is this part of like an ongoing broadcast, or is this more of just like a way to have fun with among the teams? Like, is you just play with the alumni team against other alumni teams as they're traveling together?
Well, we they're trying to do a lot more of alumni versus alumni NHL. But obviously the cost and, you have to have the major team kind of pick it up. But locally, we'll play against like the outdoor game. We played against UAW. We played against Ram Truck. So they put teams together and we go out and the money all goes to charity. So the majority of our games are within the city. And again, they're not great games, but we have a lot of fun. And the guys playing against us enjoy it because they're getting a face off against Jimmy Carson one night, or go against Larry Murphy, Craig Wolanin, Mickey Redmond. McCarty has fun with them. So it's a big afternoon or night for those guys. So, and we enjoy it too. We get to tell each other how good we used to be in the dressing room.
Now, I'm curious because I've heard before you, as well as other members of the alumni, have been somewhat vocal about the ways, especially in the past, that the NHL would treat or not treat ex-NHL players. Kind of their time with the league would be up, and they wouldn't do enough to support the process and the transition between being a player at the top of their game and finding something else to do with their lives. Now, the NHL Alumni has done a ton of good work, great work since then. And even in those last couple of years that you mentioned you've been playing with the alumni teams, do you notice that significant changes are being made even as of 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah. 100% since Glenn Healy took over, as you guys know. He has brought the NHL alumni right where it should be. And he has worked with financial institutions to try and take care of the older guys that don't have that good pension that they started, I think, in 87 or 87, where, there was a lump sum for the players that played over 400. Some of us didn't get that pension because you had to come back and play 40 games. If you remember, you might be too young, Mickey, but Brian will remember, Guy Lafleur came out of retirement. Gilbert Perreault came out of retirement. Danny Gare played 40 games. They had to dress and be involved in 40 games. That added to their career in years before, and they got the old and the new. Well, there were some guys that were qualified but had to play, and in my case, I couldn't latch on with a team. Danny Gare, Glenn Sather did him a favor, brought him back into the fold, dressed him for 40 games, played him 1 or 2 shifts, and then released him after 40 games, but Danny picked up. So Glenn now has tried to take care of those guys that got left behind that year.
Right.
And not only that, just creating deals with Hertz, car rentals, just hotels.
Wiser, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everything Glenn and his group, Scott and anybody else that's under them, they have done 100%. I mean, it's night and day. And again, it's Glenn going in and fighting with the NHL clubs and taking them to relieve some of the cash also. So I think, yeah, but you're right. The NHL did not. They only cared really about the current guys, which you can't fault them for doing it. But every league, professional league in North America, takes care of their older players. Some of these guys, after 5 years, especially baseball, they got a real nice pension. Obviously,
Right,
you understand they got great TV money. We never had that TV money back in my era, and now it's starting to come. So I applaud Glenn Healy and his group, and I applaud the NHL for knowing, hey, there is a problem.
Coming on board, yeah.
You know, yeah.
One of the things that Glenn's brought to the table too, in addition to that, is the fact that one of the issues that the NHL alumni has always had, as with the PA, is that there's a small percentage of guys that drive a large part of the industry. You know, the Crosbys, Ovechkins, and that the jersey sales, McDavid's. And the same holds true for the alumni. And the problem is when the alumni leave the league, they're on their own or have been on their own. And so somebody like Wayne Gretzky would say, well, okay, show me a plan that makes sense because I get all this money coming,
right,
from endorsements and that directly to me. And I don't mind helping the other guys. But if I'm driving, 80% of the business, how is that equitable for me? I'm giving away a lot of money, and you got to show me how it's going to work for everybody, because I don't mind doing that as long as it goes to the right places. And what Glenn's been able to do was work with, and because he's respected by all these guys, he's been able to work with guys like Wayne Gretzky and Mario Lemieux and Bobby Orr and bring them into the fold, which they never saw. Those guys never really saw a proper plan so that they could agree to do that, because they got to make sure that the money that they're giving up is going to go to the right places. And Glenn convinced them to come on board, which makes it so much easier for companies like ours to do deals with one entity rather than go try and find each individual player. Right. We want to do a group deal. We can't do it, just like the PA. So that's what he's brought to the table in addition to all that.
And it feels as though, Eddie, even just over the past, because I heard some of what you had mentioned about the league and the and past players, especially in the wake of what happened to Mark Pavelich, an old roommate of yours in New York. And we don't need to open that back up again, because I know that's a whole other conversation to have. But it's great to see your perspective having changed with the result of some of the positive influences that have come about the league. But I mentioned New York and the time you spent there. Let's dig into that a little bit. Let's lighten it up and talk about your days. In Edmonton, you said you were buddy with Wayne and some of the other guys there. It seemed as though in New York you had a different kind of relationship with one of the players in Ron Duguay, an infamous personality in the league. You have been called his wingman on some occasions, although you've declined the fact that he has ever needed a wingman in the first place. Tell us about that shift from Shake Shack to Studio 54, the move to New York and what that did.
And by the way, Ron's agreed to come on the show at some point, so he's going to have rebuttal.
There you go.
That's quite all right, because he won't remember what happened in New York. When he called 3 years ago, I think it was, I was on my way to Little Caesars for the Red Wing games, and he calls me up. He says, Eddie, I need to ask you some questions. I go, what do you mean? He says, I'm going to finally do a book. They've been after me for a few years. I'm going to do a book. But you got to help me out. What did we do back then? What do you mean, what did we do back then? So here's the story, and this is the truth, okay? All right, so let's go with the first one. We always used to go. Barry Beck was also a third guy. But we'd always be at Studio, and Studio 54 was a great spot. Got to meet a lot of people, but it was a good entertainment spot too. That for a lot of you that don't know, they used to have dancers come out of the ceiling with poles all the way onto the dance floor. Every half hour there was a show, or 45 minutes. And the Rubel, and I forget his partner's name, but they did a great job. And they really welcomed the hockey players. Mark Beneke was the doorman that you see in the movies, where his job was to let you in or not to let you in. Anytime we pulled up, it was like, come on in. The lineup would be a mile down the road. So we got treated pretty well. But there was a couple incidents there. Ron would call me up and he said, Eddie, we're going to go to a play. I said, Ron, I was out the night before. I'm a little tired. I'm not a big play guy anyways. He says, well, you like this one. And I says, why? He says, it's The Burning Bed with Farrah Fawcett. I said, okay. He said, we're going to go to her dressing room afterwards and then go out to dinner. I go, all right, I'm in. So we finish the play, and we go back in the dressing room, and if you remember The Burning Bed, the last scene is she's in a negligee, okay? Well, she was still in that shorty nightgown, or whatever you want to call it, when we came in. So we're sitting there, we're having a glass of wine, and Doogie's not saying anything. I'm doing all the talking, right? Okay. Hey, Farrah. Boom, boom, boom. Anyways, she says, okay, let's go get some dinner, and let me get dressed, and we'll go. So she gets into another room, and Dukes is giving me this one, nodding, meaning here's the door. Here's the door. And I go, what?
Oh, no.
I said, what are you talking about? He says, come on, I can handle it from here. You dirty rat. So anyways, I go up. The second story is Bianca Jagger. So he calls me up. He says, hey, I need you to come with me. We're going to Bianca's dinner party. I go, Dukes, He says, no, come on. It'll be fun. So I'm thinking there's going to be some people around, right? Well, we get to her penthouse. Butler lets us in, or whatever you want to call him. She comes out. We're having a cocktail. There's only the three of us. So I'm keep waiting, and I'm thinking maybe we were early, right? Half hour goes through. She says, why don't we sit down for dinner? And I go, I don't say anything. I'm thinking, son of a gun. What has he got me into?
He did it again.
So we sit down in this long table. Now, I don't know if you remember all these movies that have the husband, the wife, and then the kid in the side. Well, that's me.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a huge table. They can't even talk because it's a big table. I'm in the side. So anyways, I'm, again, carrying the whole conversation. She says, we finished dinner. She says, okay, I'm going to go fix us some dessert. So again, she leaves. It's just me and Dukes at this long table, and he gives me the nod again. He says, okay, I can handle it from here. So that's number two. Okay, so it still goes on. We don't have to, but you get the gist of the thing. So I'm the wingman.
I get the gist of it.
I'm the wingman until Dukes decides he can handle it. So, and that's exactly that's exactly what he was doing when he phoned me about his book. And I had to relive it again. He says, oh.
Yeah, tell him all about it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't.
Did you ever hear any story about him and Cher, who was so big at the time as well?
We had to run from Cher.
That was rumors.
We had to run from Cher. We started at a place called, I think it was called Visage or the Red Parrot. And Dukes had already, I didn't have anything to do with Cher. He was on his own there. He did well, but he says to me, he says, she's gravitating to me, and I can't do anything. She's everywhere I go. So we were out partying, and sure enough, there was Cher. He says, we got to go. And we take off. She shows up at the next place. And yes, he actually ran from Cher. He did. He's probably got a good story for you and I'll let him talk. Just tell him, Eddie wants you to talk about the night that Cher was appearing in Winnipeg, and I think Dukes did a stint with Winnipeg, and somehow some of the guys they were asked if they could meet Cher after the show or before the show. I forget what it was, and she said, as long as Ron Duguay's not with them.
Whoa! So things
he burned a little bit of a bridge
he burned
there.
a little bridge, but ask him. I might have that wrong. I think Ronnie did a stint with the Jets right before he. Oh, by the way, ask him if he's retired yet, because he still hasn't officially retired. Okay.
Oh, really?
Serious. Ask him.
Is that true?
Well, have you seen anything
So
in
Ron
the
is
papers
down-
10 years ago, 12 years ago?
No. Ron is down in Florida right now, I think, with a good buddy of ours, Mike McKenzie.
Right.
He tends to post a lot of pictures of them in the afternoon having a few cocktails. And rumor has it he's dating Sarah Palin, so he's never stopped.
I
Look
got
at my
pictures.
dad with these rumors. What is going on
I
here?
got pictures.
Well,
He sent me a picture. When I heard it, actually, we were thinking about going into Clark Gillies Memorial the week after he died. And it was Joey Cantilano, who was a good friend of Clarkie, who was setting it up, sent me this text. He said, page 6, New York Post has it that Ron's dating Sarah Palin. I go, you got to be kidding me. So anyways, he shows me the picture, Ron and Sarah. So I texted him. I said, Dukes, what's going on with this? You know, is it true? What's going on? He sent me a picture. She's in it, and it underneath a text he sent, a text with a picture says, she's in my kitchen right now. She was in the kitchen. He took a picture and she was cooking. So I guess the rumors are true. All right.
well,
The rumors are true.
again, I would never, I'm not like TMZ. I won't talk about anything that I shouldn't be talking
Sure.
about. But if it's sitting there front and center on Facebook or Instagram and they're friends of mine, then I'll
it's true.
talk
That's
about
fair.
it because everybody else knows
No,
too.
no,
It's
it's
fun.
true.
I mean,
It's true.
it's impressive knowing that a guy nicknamed the Italian Stallion was the wingman for someone else. But I guess there's always a bigger fish. Who knows? I don't know what his deal is.
Hey,
Listen,
by
Eddie,
the way, he never set me up. Okay.
he didn't.
Never.
Nice
Selfish,
guy.
just selfish.
Not once with Farrah's friends or Bianca's friends. Nothing. I got
Nothing.
zilch.
Chopped liver over here.
I know.
Where was Bianca at the time with, I mean, obviously she was married to Mick. Was that over at the
Yeah,
time?
they were
and she
divorced.
kept the name? I can't
They
remember.
were divorced.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were divorced.
Because you don't want to mess around with Mick.
No.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Look, we're running a little bit low on time. Eddie, we appreciate all the time you've given us so far. You're currently, I want to touch on this just briefly so you can speak about your current position as the director of North America and a player agent for Octane Sports, settling into that role nicely. Can you say a little bit about the company, maybe about what you do, and maybe
Yeah.
some of our listeners can reach out for some information?
Well, as Brian knows, I worked with IMG and Mike Barnett for 12 years, representing Sergei Fedorov, Joe Thornton. So anyways, when Wayne, we were going to touch about it, when Wayne had some ownership in Phoenix, he brought Mike Barnett, and the year after he asked me to leave IMG and come and be director of player development with assistant GM job in the wings. So we did that for 5 years. And then I came back, as you said, I was his VP of sales in the States. Long story short, about 5 years ago, someone came and said, you should get back in the agent business. And two of my friends said the same thing. So the three of us started Octane Sports. And we're back in the game. And we don't have any players in the NHL, but the number one goaltender in the OHL is Ben Gaudreau. It was my first get 4 years ago. He'll have a great career with San Jose. Look forward to hopefully signing him in April, according to San Jose. But then we have 4 kids on the development team here in the U.S., 2 going into the draft this year. So it's coming, and I'm enjoying it again. Some mornings I wake up saying, what did I get into again? But that's my life is hockey, and I like working with young kids. I hired Wayne Smith, who I think, Brian, Mickey, you might know, was the head scout of the Boston Bruins during their Stanley Cup years. Unfortunately, he got fired, but I brought him in. He's a great visionary. He's a great judge of talent. He does some of our development team. He's doing great in Ottawa area. In fact, you'll love this, Brian, that Mike Kruzelinski and his son were thinking of joining forces, bringing them on to Octane, even though they have their own business called NXT. But Mike now is doing a little bit of the bird dogging and enjoying it. And obviously with Michigan, we're pretty tight in. So it's coming, Mickey, Brian. It's a tough business. There's a lot of great agencies out there. And the only market I really haven't dived into yet is the Toronto area, which obviously because of COVID the last 2 years, really tough for me to get there. But I'll open up that market pretty sure with Mike with me. And we're looking for getting a guy in that area also. So it's been good. And I think in 5 years, you'll hear more of Octane Sports because all our kids will be in the NHL. So
anything we can do to help. As a matter of fact, I've been keeping my eye on a kid that I'll let you know about off the thing.
Sure.
I have a very good relationship, and his father's and I are very close. I flew him into Toronto just to see the place and keep the relationship strong. He's only 12 or 13 years old now, but he's got a couple years to go, but somebody you should keep an eye on. And I'd recommend you because I know you well.
Well, Brian, you say 12, 13, that's what guys are recruiting. They're recruiting 09s, which are 12 years old. I unfortunately don't want to do that, except you have to throw your name in there. You don't want them latching on to somebody that young, Unfortunately, I would like to wait till they're 16. But there's no way you're going to get ahead in this business. You got to recruit them at 13 years old, 13, 14 at the latest.
Well, in the sense that you don't have to necessarily recruit them, but as you say, you just got to, start build. I built a relationship with them since the kid's 10, just because I saw him and I liked him and I said, boy, this kid's talented for 10. Now, I'm not a hockey expert like you are in terms of skill sets, but he's good. I mean, I've seen a lot of talent over the years.
I don't know. I've seen you on the ice, Brian. You're not bad. You scored on Eddie Mio. So, come on.
You can teach this kid how to score with his ass, Dad. It'll be great.
No, but I've been watching a long time.
Do you guys have a quick minute for the story I thought you were going to ask about us on the plane going to Minneapolis?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah, I'd love to hear this story.
So we finally are told to get going. So we load up everything. And the flight takes off, and we're still climbing. And the pilot door opens up, and one of the pilots says, "Who's paying for this?" And we're all looking around going, "What do you mean? Who's paying for it? Wherever we're going, they're going to pay for it." They go, "Well, we need some form of payment." I go, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, I'm going to turn right back and go back to the Indianapolis airport." So I'm looking at Peter Driscoll. Peter Driscoll doesn't have a credit card. He just does everything in cash. Obviously, Wayne's making more money than we are, but his money's with Walter and Phyllis. So I look at the pilot and I said, "Do you take a credit card?" He goes, "Yeah." Believe it or not, he took a credit card, the old swiper, right? So he swipes it, sends it back to me. I'm looking at it to sign, and I stop. And Peter Driscoll's sitting beside me. He says, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, look at this." "Yeah, so," I said, "It's $10,000. He goes,
"Jesus."
Okay. So I go, "All right, sign it." Boom. They give me a copy back. And I look at Peter and I says, "You think they'll check?" And they go, "Check what?" I says, "My credit card." He said, "Why?" I said, "It's got a $500 Canadian limit on it." So they didn't check, and it was with TD. Toronto Dominion, right? So, Brian, you know where I'm going with this now. So anyways, we land in Edmonton, and John Short was the PR guy at the time. He comes in and he says, "Guys, you're late. All the press, you got to go." I said, "I'm not leaving this plane until you take care of this." And I gave him my receipt, and he ripped it up in front of me and gave the American Express. He says, "Go." Well, in hindsight, we didn't know what Wayne. I should have kept that copy, framed it for Wayne, right? Now, who was Wayne?
It would have been worth it big time.
But who was Wayne with for so many years? And I think he's still with them TD, right?
Right.
So that would have worked out.
Right.
It was a TD card that got
Wow,
us.
that would be a whole commercial.
Yes.
That would be a commercial
That's why
in itself.
I knew you would like it, right? And so, in essence, that was the way. I mean, the story is more because we all panicking that they were going to call. But by the time we got there, that flight, and by the way, we went to the wrong airport, right? So we go to the international airport, and everything's dark because now it's about 11 o'clock Edmonton time. By the time we got on, all dark. Custom guy gets on the plane. He says, "You guys got to be at the city airport. They're all waiting for you there." So guess what? Take off again. Guess what came back to me? The old credit swiper. Because it was only to the international airport so there was another $1,000 there, right? So in any case, it was taken care of. It never went through. But it's still a story that.
And you guys would have maybe been back in Minneapolis without Eddie Mio there.
And
what was Wayne a nervous flyer back then as he is now?
Yeah. In fact,
he didn't like flying.
We had that little plane. I got a picture that I'll send to you when I find it. Who knows, of us before we got on the plane. Wayne sitting in the plane. It's a small little Learjet, very small. Our equipment took up everything. Wayne was sitting on the cooler that had our beer and sandwiches, right? I mean, and he was a nervous wreck. We ended up giving a few beers to calm him down. So, but yes, he is a nervous wreck. And, but we got there and look what happened.
Yeah.
Hey,
amazing.
it's all
we
water under
have
the
to
bridge.
get you back on.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of more stories. I know because I've heard them from Eddie over the years that we got to get to it. At some point, we got to get you back on. It's been awesome, Eddie.
Well, story after story. Eddie, we appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, octanesports.com if you're out there listening and you want to check it out. Eddie, once again, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insight, going into depth and finally shedding some color on the stories that guys like Gus Badali and Stan Butler set up for us in the first place. So, Eddie, anything else you want to shout out? Anything you want to send people towards on your end?
No, I think you guys have got a good show going. I've heard about it, but you got a pretty good dad there, and he's been very supportive of not only of the alumni, but he does some things that other guys that own businesses like his won't do. So stay close to him. And when I'm in Toronto, I'll give you guys a shout. It depends if your dad's in town or in Florida or in Europe or on in the Caribbean, wherever, dancing with his lovely wife on the beach. But we'll do this again, that. So it's all fun. So thank you guys.
Awesome.
Once again, for Eddie Mio, for Brian Aaronworth, president of Frameworth Sports Marketing, and myself, Mikey Aaronworth, this has been the Sign Off Podcast, and this is us signing off. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it to the end of yet another episode. Thanks again so much for joining us. You can find videos of all of our episodes on YouTube by searching the Sign Off Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter at Frameworth Sport or Instagram at Frameworth Sports. And hey, if you're not sick of me yet, you can find me on Twitter over at Retrograde Mikey, or you can always find me embarrassing myself over on Instagram at Aaronworth. The Sign Off is a proud product of Fadoo Productions and Sad Styles Productions, executive producers Mikey Aaronworth and Andrew Bascom. Until next week, this is Mikey Aaronworth, signing off.
Furnished by Sad Styles Productions.
Get into it.